We start the day off with a panel on competing narratives, identity, and influence, and how they shape the Western Balkans' Euro-Atlantic journey. Guiding this important conversation is Dr. Olivera Komar, Professor of Political Science at the University of Montenegro. Olivera, with great pleasure, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome to the panel about competing narratives, identity, influences, and Euro-Atlantic journey of Western Balkans. As you can see, we have a lot to talk about, and we don't have much time, as you know. We have 40 minutes, so we should start going. Sophie already said something really important, and that is that today we live in a world where wars are not waged only with arms. I'm not naive. I know that that was the case before, but not to this extent. Today, battles for people's minds, for controlling people's minds, are constant. So there is no ceasefire. And what is the best way to control people's minds and to control people? To confuse them. And how do you do that? You do that by feeding false information, by feeding alternative information, by feeding information that creates doubt. And although skepticism and doubt is healthy to some extent, it can also create confusion, and confusion results in lack of trust. I don't know if you were here during our last panel, but yesterday we talked about what happens when people lose trust into domestic international organizations and institutions. What happens is that you just have really palpable consequences of an invisible enemy. So this morning we have three exquisite participants and panelists to try to start the conversation on this really, really important and really, really difficult topic, and we'll just start going. I will introduce our first panelist, and that is German Ambassador to Montenegro, His Excellency Ambassador Peter Felten. Please join us. Our second panelist, who will also join us at the stage in a minute, is Mr. Emanuele Giaufret, Deputy Managing Director for Europe and Central Asia at EEAS. Please, Dr. Giaufret, join us. And our third panelist today is Ambassador of Italy to Montenegro, Her Excellency Ms. Andreina Marsella. Please join us. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. So, good morning again. Thank you for volunteering to start this conversation, really tough conversation, early in the morning. I was thinking how to wake up everyone and how to start, and I came up with the best hits of alternative narratives and competing narratives, and let me present some of them to you. So what you can hear today is things like this: EU is in crisis, it's falling apart, why should we even bother? Or you can hear something like, and this is my favorite because it's really clever. It says we should never beg. We should always follow our interests. You know, like EU is not our interest, so if we go down and analyze this one. Or this one, neutrality like Switzerland is better than choosing sides. We are too small to choose sides, and who doesn't want to be Switzerland? There is another one which is really good, saying joining EU means betraying our historic allies and also our Slavic brotherhood. And what is great about all these narratives that can be heard in Montenegro nowadays, but also in the region, I would say, is they are so well married to the common sense. They sound great, they're very seductive, and they resonate well. So the problem with all of these is the consequences that I mentioned. Montenegro has very high support to joining EU, but for the first time since the beginning of negotiations, this support, the trend is, in a sense, significantly going down. So let's talk about these narratives and their power, their consequences. Let's start maybe with Ambassador Felten. If I may say, you represent a country who's been very consistent in supporting Western Balkans enrollment to European Union. Do you find these narratives surprising? Do you encounter them? Do you think they have the power to change the path that Montenegro and other countries in Western Balkans are on?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. This is my fourth conference to be secure, but the first time here on stage, so thank you for having me here. The narratives, I think one needs to look at them one by one, and some, I would say, have the potential to influence the population against the EU accession, others not so much. You started your list with the one EU is in crisis. I mean, it's a typical narrative to weaken the EU from inside and from outside. I mean, telling our populations in the EU member states that this whole thing is eroding, basically eroding the whole post-World War II and Cold War structure we have. And then towards the countries of the Western Balkans, obviously the message is it's not worth making the effort to adapt to the EU acquis, undertaking all these reforms, and maybe implicitly the message, don't join them, join somebody else, or whatever. And it's this typical narrative which emanates from the idea that partnership doesn't mean anything. We have stretched out our hand to Russia for many years and suggested a real partnership, and it took us some time to understand that on the other side they didn't understand the idea of partnership. And that they don't want the EU as an actor, and that they want some agglomeration of weak states in Europe which could be somehow used or whatever in what is perceived as a competition between big powers. This is what Russia considers itself. So, not surprising as an attempt, but my impression here in Montenegro is, and I've also traveled neighboring countries, I think actually that the image of the EU is quite a solid one. That the EU is perceived as a success story, as a harbinger of wealth, so to speak. And this kind of image, we know, is pretty solid. And it takes a lot to change this image. Therefore, I personally am not too worried that this idea, the EU is in crisis, and so it's not worth joining, gains a lot of ground here. Of course, maybe it's necessary to explain much more that having debate or sometimes confrontation does not mean crisis or collapse. It's the way how the EU is designed, and we need, on the practical side, react to that by undertaking reforms, and a lot of discussion is going on that. We need to become more agile. Decision-making processes need to become simpler. We need to be able to act more and not react. All this needs to be done. But on the other hand, and I think this is a very good message for Montenegro actually, how we are designed, it's not about pushing small member states to the wall, so to speak. Everybody has a say, and Montenegro, once it joins the European Union, will be among the smaller member states. And people in the EU are free to vote, to speak. The living standard has increased in all countries that have recently joined the European Union. And on the other hand, you have a country where civil society is silenced, arrested, killed, where the natural resources are wasted by selling them at a discount in order to buy weapons from rogue states or to keep other states at least neutral, so to speak. And actually, how many people in the Western Balkans want to find a job in Russia, for example, want to go on holiday in Russia, want to send their children to university in Russia? You know, you can, and many people can be very critical about the EU, and there's a lot to criticize and a lot of problems and things, but if people make their personal choice, if they have to make their personal choice between this authoritarian regime and our EU, I think most of them will actually choose the European Union. And for that reason, this narrative, I think, is not so problematic. The other ones related to values, as you said, or also this narrative that we want to join the European Union, but they don't let us in, it takes too much time, they will keep us out, it doesn't work, and so on. These are the ones which I think need to be taken more seriously.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more, although it seems like the choice is never presented that way. So when you say it, it seems very logical, but what we can hear is that we are not talking about going to Russia for education, never. We're not talking about looking for a job. We are always talking about something more mystical that kind of works sometimes for people. I don't know if you agree with that, but in communications where we hear something like we should be brothers, we should stand with our historic allies and so on, but maybe I didn't see that right.
Again to me? Well, it's going in the value direction. Of course, it's one of these narratives which say that the West will make us rich, but it will destroy our people, the Serbian people, the civilization, the faith, the families, the traditions, and so on. Yeah, fine. And we are talking about European values. But what are these values? And if you go to the Lisbon Treaty, and I did it in preparation for this panel for the first time, and Article 2 spells out these values, and they are human dignity, human rights, democracy, freedom, rule of law, and equality. I mean, what is so wrong about these values? There is a big thing made of the European values which are intrusive, which are trying to damage structures, which are trying to squeeze people into something. But indeed, these are very open values, and actually they are universal values. And when Montenegro and the other Western Balkans countries joined the United Nations, they subscribed to these values. And when they joined the Council of Europe and OSCE and so on, they subscribed to them. So it's not the EU coming with something very alien, so to speak, to the region and imposing it on the region, on those who want to join the European Union. No, it's something very open. And then let's ask the question, those who try to terrify people with the European values, what is their interest? Maybe their interest is to keep their constituency under their control, kind of, or keep their power position, or even their material advantage. So I think it's important to talk about this value dimension, but to demystify it, to talk more precisely what is it about actually, and thereby remove some of these alleged dangers which make it easy for those who want to abuse this in order to deter people from the European Union to change their mind.
Thank you. I like very much that you mentioned this threatening people with EU values. That's one thing that I forgot on my list, but it's there. Dr. Giaufret, so can you also provide comment on these narratives? Do you see danger in them? Even yesterday we heard that on this very stage that we need to look after our own interests, and that sounds very logical. It sounds great. I mean, who cannot be against their own interests? And would you say that EU was successful so far in launching some sort of counter communication? Would you change anything? I mean, a lot of questions, but yeah.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, first of all, at this beautiful conference in this beautiful place in Montenegro, and to address these very topical questions of narratives and counter-narratives. I would say that the first thing is that why do we have these narratives? Because probably someone is concerned. Because the project is functioning, so we need to stop it. So we need to react, we need to instill doubt, as you said, and we need to intensify this counter-narrative because things are actually changing. You know, we stopped the pause button back in 2013 after the Croats joined the European Union, and there was a long pause in enlargement. And now the enlargement is on starting. There's a very strong momentum. It is a geostrategic interest of the European Union. So things are actually happening. And certainly Montenegro, as a front runner, is the closest to the finishing line. So obviously someone is not happy about this and needs to counteract. So I think this is a starting point. It's not only us that are reacting, others are also reacting to what we do. Why do they react? Because we know that joining the European Union makes member states stronger. There's an historical record now since the Treaty of Rome that the countries that join the European Union are stronger and the European Union is stronger as such. So it's a win-win. So it's much preferable for some to have countries that are alone, that are dependent, that are weak, that are influenceable. So this is why these things are happening. And how do we actually counterbalance this? I think we have to counterbalance this with our successes and with our steps. I think we need to speak with facts, and facts are very clear. 60% of the trade of Western Balkans is with the EU. People go to study there, to work there. But we need to move further. We need to to introduce a sense of belongings, certainly here in the Western Balkans for the citizens, even before accession. And this is a little bit the logic of the growth plan. One of the pillars is to have this gradual accession, which sounds very theoretical, but has a very concrete steps. For example, this SEPA, the Single European Payment Area. So when citizens that have actually families or business in Europe can actually wire money back and forth without paying additional fees, this is a very concrete thing. People say, I belong to this place. We're working on the roaming like at home. And now we are really trying to go more further to what we've done through the Commission is working through beyond the roadmap for the voluntary roaming. And I think people traveling from Podgorica to Milan, I know that there are regular flights and they can actually use the same phone. I think it would make a big difference. So this is a sense of belonging that we need to create, and it's a very powerful narrative, I believe. I don't think we need to be complacent about this counter-narrative they created. Of course, this is a serious thing that indicates the willingness of certain actors, including Russia, to stop, to prevent, to actually prevent citizens of the Western Balkans to join the European family, where they belong historically, culturally, I believe. Because at the end of the day, I think here people, and I spent 4 years in the Western Balkans, they do like the European values. They like to be free, they like to be able to speak, they are to be able to move, to be able to have access to healthcare, to be able to open their own business. This is what the European Union is about, that you have a judge that decides about your rights, what is wrong and what is right, independently. Are very concrete things, and I don't think that the people in the Western Balkans have different views. So we need to hammer down these benefits that the EU brings, both to the citizens but also to the country, because there's no country in the European Union that became weaker after joining the European Union. They all became stronger.
Would you say that since 2028 is coming up, that we are now racing against the clock and that the narratives on the other side are intensified?
Well, I think we can expect that as we're coming closer to the finishing line, people will get on the other side, will become more and more worried, and probably they will do more and more things to try to stop the train that is actually moving fast. And this is why it's essential that we all remain laser focused on the final objective. And we know what needs to be done in order to reach the final destination, which is basically reforms. As the ambassador was saying, need to reforms. We have a roadmap, we have a deadline, we have a lot of support from the European Commission here in Montenegro and throughout the region. We have extra funds. So this is what we need to do. Remain absolutely focused on what needs to be done, because this is how we will avoid to be distracted and to offer opportunity to those that don't want Montenegro, for example, to become a successful member of the European Union to reach its objective.
Thank you, Ambassador Marsella. So one of the things that we can hear, and I keep coming back to it, is that we should never fight with our historic allies. You come from a country who many in Montenegro see as one of the historic partners, so maybe this is the right question for you. How can your country and other countries use their diplomatic, bilateral and multilateral tools to actually counter these growing narratives that, I don't know if you agree with it, but they are actually growing in the past times?
First of all, as my predecessor said, thank you very much for inviting me, for having me on this panel. Also for me, like for Peter, is the fourth time here at To Be Secure Forum, but the first time on stage, and is very convenient because unfortunately will be my last To Be Secure Forum, because in July I will end my mandate here. To come to your question, you know, diplomacy, generally speaking, can do a lot in terms of trying to dispel negative narratives, even if we have to, start from a consideration. Negative narratives are normally quite powerful, because it's easier to, spread negative narratives, especially if they are false, and especially if they are spread by purpose, by states that most of the time they are autocracies, and so they want to fight against democracies because they try to weaken us in a way or in another. So this is a general consideration that we need to have in mind, just to be aware of that. But this is not an issue, this is not a problem. We share also, and we value the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and this is the reason why they believe that it's easier to spread false and negative narratives in our countries, because it would be always very difficult for us to counterbalance that. But actually, the EU and all the EU countries are becoming better and better in countering negative narratives. And I believe that also diplomacy can play its role. And as Italian here, I've always felt very much embraced by Montenegrin people. I mean, there are some historical links between our two countries that are so strong that the friendship between Italian and Montenegrin people is basically immediate. So, for me, it has never been a problem, it has never been an issue being here and, have an interaction with my Montenegrin friends. But generally speaking, and echoing what has already been said, what we can do in order to try to dispel any kind of negative narratives towards the EU is to show them by example that actually the EU, it's not only the EU a success story, but the country that entered in the EU have been a success story. They became a success story themselves. And the best example of that is Croatia. I mean, since 2013, and I mentioned Croatia not only because it's the last country that entered the EU, but also because it was part of this area, and it was part also of ex-Yugoslavia like Montenegro was. If we look at Croatia from 2013 to now, the kind of change that the country has known is dramatic in a positive way. So, the country has changed dramatically, so positively, that, that could show by example to everybody that actually entering the EU is the real success story. Because what any country can get inside the EU is incredible. It's really, a big achievement.
I can agree with that, especially having known that very often people in Montenegro associate European Union with prosperity, with living standards, with living better, and so on. So probably that is how they see it. But which of these narratives, or some others maybe, if I haven't mentioned all of them, probably not, do you think are the most powerful? Negative ones.
Well, for sure, you're right. Normally, we have always seen, especially here in Montenegro, high percentage of support to the idea of entering the EU. And in most of the cases, we know that this is linked to the fact that, of course, entering the EU, they expect an economic development that they haven't known before. So for sure, this is one element. But I believe it is important also to point out to other elements, just to show them that actually the advantage of becoming member of the EU, it's not only an economic advantage, but much broader than that. And I'm making reference, for example, to the concept of national identity that is, very much used, actually, in order to diminish the role of the European Union and the European integration process. Because people said that actually entering the EU, a country ran the risk of losing its national identity. Well, I'm Italian. We are a founder of the EU, and I can tell you that we haven't lose our national identity. And I believe that the big and beautiful thing of the European Union is that allows any countries to maintain its national identity, but at the same time help any countries to get rid of nationalism, that is the negative side of national identity. There is nothing wrong and nothing bad on affirming our national identity. What is wrong and what is bad is nationalism. But the beautiful thing of the European Union is exactly that. It helps us and it lets us to keep national identity, but it helps us also in getting rid of any kind of thinking and movement of thoughts concerning nationalism.
Thank you. I want to follow up on that, but before I do so, in order not to run out of time for questions, I would propose that now we collect some questions from the audience, if there are some, and then we go back to our discussion. So, are there any questions from the audience to our distinguished guests? Yes, please, if you can introduce yourself and ask the question. Yeah, here's the microphone.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the microphone and the possibility to raise a question. My name is Weber. I'm coming from Germany, but I'm working in Croatia. I'm a part there of the defense sector, so to say, in a broad manner. I'm just looking at the headline that is displayed here behind you, and it says competing narratives. I'm still waiting for the competition, to be honest. Now, we have heard a lot of arguments in favor for joining the EU, which is, of course, right and great, and I see all these pros for countries and even smaller countries to join the EU. But I took, for example, yesterday the opportunity to talk to the young people who showed us this wonderful dancing display yesterday, and they were also full in favor for the EU. But of course, on the other hand, they are also seeking for the freedom of travel, freedom of work, and that could lead to a brain drain here in Montenegro, and of course, a drain of labor. And Madam Ambassador, you said Croatia is one of the best examples how a country could evolve when they are joining the EU. But on the other hand, Croatia has also the highest inflation rate amongst the EU Euro states. So how to conquer these things? So I think it's a question of, to say the truth, on the one hand to face the pros, which are incredible, of course, but on the other hand also to face and to address the threats for the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we collect the questions, and then we have one more at the back of the audience, in the middle of the audience. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to ask my question. My name is Elif, and about the identity, I would like to ask how joining the EU would affect the way people see their identity, and would there be any balance in their national identity and the shared European identity? Would there any be mix, or how would people balance it?
Thank you. Do you have a specific person that you want to ask the question, or
no,
whomever picks it up? Okay. Thank you. So, should we start for the first question, maybe, and then give time to your colleagues to maybe come up with the answer to the second?
Okay.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the inflation rate, if I don't mistake, that I believe it's linked to the fact that Croatia just recently joined the monetary union, adopted the euros, etc. And it's normal at the beginning. Also in Italy, when we adopted euros, we had an inflation rate, and I mean, I was in Italy at the time, and I can tell you everything seems to us like it was costing double. But this is the initial phase, and this is only part of the story, because the other argument or the counter-argument is that the stability, that the fact that also Croatia is part of the Eurozone, the stability that it brings to the economy, and the advantage in the medium term, not talk about the longer term that is bigger and bigger, the advantage are much bigger. But I want to comment also on your question of the brain drain, in a way, because you mentioned also that. And indeed, this is a problem. And this is a problem not only for Croatia, this is a problem for the Western Balkans, generally speaking. All the countries of the Western Balkans, already now, they are in a situation of losing forced labor because everybody wants to go abroad and working abroad. But the idea is entering the EU, having an economic development after that, and the economic condition of the country will improve, and that will keep some people to stay. Of course, there is always a percentage of people that would decide to leave, that would prefer to live abroad, that would think that there are better opportunities abroad. And maybe this is true. But the beautiful thing, again, of the European Union, and that you can do that without feeling guilty. And at the same time, if you at a certain stage decide that you want to come back, to use the experience that you have done abroad and bring it back to your countries, you do that. And at the end of the day, it's the economy of the whole Eurozone that take advantage of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone would like to ask to answer the second question? Okay.
Well, happy to do so, but coming back to the first one, narratives, competing narratives, honestly speaking, I often feel a little bit uncomfortable when we are talking what are our narratives, or in one of the preparatory papers it's that storytelling or so. This always sounds as if we make something up, as if we invent something. And I think we need to be careful about these wordings, because the one big advantage we have is credibility and the perception of credibility, and we need to preserve this. So we always need what we are talking about linked closely to what is happening. And of course, I fully agree with you, the closer Montenegro comes to the European Union, the more we need to talk about what exactly it means for citizens, for business people, and so on, because things will change, and we cannot say, oh, everything will be wonderful, and it's, you know, we need to go into detail, and we are approaching, as Montenegro approaches the EU, we are approaching the moment when we should talk more about this in detail, as, for example, the German Montenegrin Business Club will do very soon, with events which will address to businessmen what it means, actually, when they are a full member of the common market. On the identity thing, you know, I look at Germany, and Germany is not that old as a country, but then it was divided, and still the Bavarians are Bavarians, and the Saxons are Saxons, and those from the North Sea are from the North Sea. Nothing has changed. Everybody is proud, and everybody is free to live according to his or her or their traditions. So there is no problem, and I would simply expect Montenegro, when entering the European Union, to enrich further this diversity, and there will be no problem. And maybe one thing about this value frame that the European Union provides. Of course, I mean, domestic violence cannot be excused by tradition. Sorry, there's a red line. But there are things, value-related things, where countries are completely free to take their decisions. For example, how you regulate the relationship between the state and the churches, or the state and the religious communities. You have a broad variety of possibilities within the EU. I mean, how you design LGBTIQ legislation, a broad diversity across the EU, how you address the issue of organ donation, or even euthanasia, in the sense of if somebody is terminally ill, what right he has to claim help or whatever. Very different across the countries, very deeply value-related things. And the member states of the EU can, within this broad framework, determine for themselves what is good for them, and nobody disturbs them in that. So there is a huge possibility not only to preserve one's identity, but also to organize the life and the free legal framework according what is the beliefs and traditions in these countries. So we need to talk about it openly, to make sure that there's not so much to be afraid of.
Can I maybe follow up on identity, because we have that in the title as well. So, and maybe ask Dr. Giaufret, since you have been on some very interesting positions in the past, so being head of EU delegation in Serbia and in Tel Aviv, so you know a thing or two about identities. So do you see a danger in situation where national identity is, unlike in other countries, contested? Because Montenegro is a country with contested national identity. So you mentioned before, just to remind you, I think this was a really powerful message, that you need countries as well to not be vulnerable to foreign influence afterwards. Would you say that this identity issue can be activated or can be misused as a tool against Euro-Atlantic integrations? I don't know. I'm maybe giving you too much instructions here, so I'm not a journalist.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, I think obviously it is an issue that is someone is trying to manipulate. But I think my colleagues have been very clear that the Italians are as Italians they were in 1957, and proud to be so. And within Italy, as within in Germany, you have sub-identities at the regional level that remains very different after centuries of unity. And if you look at a new member state, the Portuguese are as Portuguese as they were before. Very proud to be. If you look at the Baltic countries, and now I've met a lot of Baltic colleagues in Brussels, and I discovered their national identity, very proud and very happy that finally, after 70 years of Soviet Union where this was a problem, they can actually express their identity because they're part of the European Union. So the reality tells us a completely different story. The EU project is a political project, and it's about unity in diversity. So diversity is considered to be a plus. So we need to strengthen diversity, which means a lot of things. For example, to protect the cultural heritage of our own member states and the candidate country, material and immaterial. So we do a lot of work, for example, in restoring beautiful castles, beautiful palaces. In Serbia, we've done a lot of work on this. We have a prize for those ladies that are entertaining and maintaining the cultural heritage. And this is absolutely great because, as a colleague said, this will make us stronger. One, perhaps, remark on the issue of migration, internal migration, brain drain, etc. I mean, as the Italian ambassador said, unfortunately, this is already happening in the Western Balkans. They're not waiting for accession to actually go. But if you remember in 2004, when there was the big enlargement, there was this campaign against the Polish plumber. There was, this, and it was coming from some older member states in some political forces saying we're going to be flooded with people coming from the east. That was the message. And now you see, look at Poland. Very successful country, much stronger economy. People, yes, are moving, but in both directions. You have actually Western European going to work in Poland because it's a big market. There's a lot of business. So it is. We have proved in the with facts that this brain drain is reversible through economic success, through economic integration, and countries become stronger through enlargement.
Thank you. Well, I'm looking with part of my vision to the clock. I think one of the not values, I don't know how to call that, but one of the things that we will in Montenegro have to get used to as we go further towards EU will be punctuality, and that's not an easy task for us. So I will invite us to look at the clock, and maybe can we set the stage for next panels to come? Can I ask everyone really briefly, what do you think that the next narrative battlegrounds for the upcoming few years for Montenegro and the region will be?
I believe that there would not be a specific domain. Every field would be a potential narrative battleground. Not only for the Western Balkans, I believe for all countries, or EU countries, NATO allies, etc. I mean, this events that we are seeing with the drones coming to our aerial space, I think is an element that will hint some narrative battlegrounds. So nobody will be out of that, and everybody and all field could be used. Then we have to think about how to counter these negative narratives, and I believe that it is important that any countries manage to do that throughout an holistic approach. That means governments, institutions, but also civil society, academia, media sector. Everybody could, help in their own specific domain in order to try to counter these negative narratives. In the case of Montenegro, I think that as much as the country gets closer to the European Union, we will see for sure, spreading narratives negative in all domains, because there's a lot of external forces who do not want Montenegro to succeed, and they will do their best to try to prevent it. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to add something, or should we close on that note? Is there something that we missed?
12 seconds. I would say link words and deeds. In the sense of the accession process is merit-based, no compromise, merits need to be earned before be eligible for accession, but once the merits have been earned, then the country is really eligible for accession. So we need to make sure that not any processes or any third aspects get into it, but we need to demonstrate to the countries that those who make a really effort and who are serious and to do the homework, if I may say so, that they will earn what they are aiming for.
Would it be undiplomatic if I say it's a very German answer? Thank you very much. Thank you very much for... Thank you very much for opening the second day. I think we gave them a lot to talk about today, and we wish you all a very fruitful discussion during the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.